Unscripted. The questions you have with the truths you need to hear.
Help doctors get into practice the way they want to get into practice. Hashtag truth. That's why we put it out there. What we want to do is we want to bring truth to the startup game.
And now your host, Michael Dinsio.
All right. Here we go. Another episode of Startup Unscripted. Now Dental Unscripted. We are pivoting to a master brand soon. Stay tuned. Dental Unscripted will be where you're going to find us. But today we are still Startup Unscripted under the Startup Unscripted brand. But today we got a great interview going on here. We're going to talk all things HR, and I'm super jacked because I got a friend of mine on the other side of this microphone. His name's Scott Mueller.
Yes.
And he's the senior executive at HR for Health, and he is going to be our resource for the next 30 to 40 minutes. So, Scotty, good to see you, man.
Hey, good to see you too, brother.
I'm digging the background for the folks that aren't watching on YouTube. I'm digging. Scott's got like this, like, I'm a sophisticated news broadcaster look, and it's super cool. So anyways, buddy,
thanks,
welcome to the show. Welcome to the show. How's it going, man?
Yeah, it's going really well. We're busy over here at HR for Health. Most certainly, lots of law changes, some new feature releases, software feature releases. We're busy. It's a good place to be.
I think HR companies are always busy. I feel like HR is just one of those things, man, that like makes all of our jobs super hard, especially dentists doing startups and becoming business owners for the very first time. HR team is just hard. You know, if you just had to do dentistry,
right,
life would be great, but you don't make the big bucks if you don't manage the team and own the company. Is that right?
That's right. But you got to have the right tools in place to do it effectively and keep yourself safe.
Keep yourself safe. That's the name of the game today. So why don't you give me like a 2-minute like rundown of what HR for Health is? Do not get long-winded. I'm known for just getting right into the good stuff. I lose people after 6 minutes, so please don't throw us down a gauntlet of a sales pitch. However, everybody needs to understand who HR for Health is. So
Absolutely. I'll keep it nice and tight here for you. So HR for Health, what we're able to help startup doctors with are three things, right? First of all, every state, every practice owner needs to make sure that they have a way to maintain HR compliance. Secondly, startup doctors need support. They've never interviewed potentially, right? They've never interviewed potential candidates as employees in their practice. And oftentimes doctors tend to DIY the daily HR processes, timekeeping, time off tracking, requesting time off, all of these things. And so what we're able to do is provide a solution that helps practice owners maintain HR compliance. And we do this through a couple of different ways. Custom employee handbook, all mandatory new hire documentation. All of these things are different all over the country. And in some states like California, Colorado, and the Pacific Northwest, sometimes documentation law changes are different from county to county and city to city. So we simplify all of that. And the end result is these doctors have a way to properly onboard each new hire. And you know as well as I do, Michael, these doctors aren't doing the old 1,500, 1,800 square foot practice build-outs anymore. They're doing 2,500 plus. And so the ability to duplicate the onboarding process from one new hire to the next is extremely important so that they're not missing anything. Secondly, we provide support. Our clients will have access to HR support because all startup doctors have questions, whether it's navigating through interviews, onboarding, and we're seeing quite a bit of doctors that are making changes or making employee changes 60 and 90 days out after a probationary period. These things are not easy to do. And so having the guidance from a true HR, dental specific HR specialist is always helpful. And then third, we're providing fantastic software so that these doctors are able to not DIY timekeeping and time off tracking, right? You're in Seattle. King County is a good example. They've got paid sick leave requirements that are different than the rest of the state. And having a timekeeping element that manages all of this safely gives them proper transparency, and really great optics is helpful. And in combination with the newly added employee scheduling feature we added back in February, that's just kind of scratching the surface, Michael. Timekeeping, performance management solutions, and a payroll. An integrated payroll is one of our products, if you wish, as well. So that's a tight little 2 minutes. Oh,
there's the gauntlet we could go down, and any path right now, right?
Right.
But yeah, like, gosh, where to even take this episode? I'm thinking about all of our clients and the crap that they deal with on a daily, yearly, monthly, whatever.
Right.
My first question queued up is biggest HR issues people overlook. Now, remember, we're talking all startups.
Yeah.
And, there's HR issues for established practice owners.
Oh, yeah.
There's different issues for acquisition if you're buying a practice, which is another podcast we have on dental acquisition unscripted. But for startups, what are some of the most overlooked, in your mind, things that our clients, doctors, need to think about for HR for a startup?
So I think the biggest problem for startup doctors, because I work with a lot of startup doctors that are, just opened their doors a week or two ago. A lot of the clients that I follow through a project process, it's all by design meant to be as proactive as possible. And I think that the biggest mistake that startup doctors make, is pushing the HR component of their project to the very end. You cannot rush through a handbook. You can't rush through posting job ads in Indeed. You got to have these things professional, ready to go. So having a plan in place that's proactive, and most states, as you know, Michael, you're starting this process with startup doctors 6 to 8 weeks out from their doors opening. In some states, 10 weeks out. Why? Yeah. Because these doctors all go through a process, as they start doing the telephone interviews. They'll have six great phone interviews. They'll schedule 6 in-person interviews. 4 of them ghost, right?
Yeah.
And so they all go through this crazy process of ghosting and all of that.
So just not thinking about HR soon enough. And I'm thinking like startups, right? Where we're with them from, Mike, how do I even do this, to 3 months into ownership. So we're with the client for a pretty long journey, usually, I don't know, 12, 16 months. And they're working through all the decisions, right? They're working through construction equipment, architecture. They're picking out their furniture. They're talking to the marketing companies, and they are not thinking for like 12 months of the time that I have them.
Sure.
They're not even thinking HR manual. They're just like, so, what is like the last moment where it would still be okay, but not like
super rush
in trouble? Yeah. Because does that make sense?
Absolutely, it does. I'll tell you, I think the best time to start talking to a startup doctor through their project process really is once plans have been approved and they're in the permitting, or they're just starting the construction process. Because generally, for most startup doctors, all the equipment, supplies, technology, all the cool stuff's been ordered.
Yeah. Design's
done, permits are back, construction contractors swing, they're staring at a project and thinking, now it's good timing, because this is typically when doctors are thinking about the business part of dentistry, the HR part. So it's a really perfect time to start talking to the doctor, because then generally 3 to 4 months out is pretty typical, Michael.
Yeah. Oh, don't call me Michael. That's weird.
It is.
That's weird.
Sorry, Mikey D.
Oh, Mikey is where you can't go. Michael is fine. If we're super formal, which apparently we're being formal right now, Michael's fine. But like the minute you go to Mikey, I'm out. Like I almost just canceled you off the program.
We can't do that. We can't do that.
No. Maybe you and me on the phone by ourselves. But If anybody calls me Mikey, I might lose it. I might
Oh
lose
boy, please don't. Let's not do this, people. That's hilarious.
it. No, I understand why you did. We go way back and have some fun time stories.
We
But
do. We do.
and maybe you call me Mikey and that'd be fine. But no, we can't do that again. All right. So all right, let's pivot to the next. My next question: how important
Mhm.
is a handbook? Because I feel like
Yeah.
if I wasn't involved, if my team, Paula, was not involved with the HR part, like me and Paula, if we weren't involved, I just don't think a lot of you listening here, without a consultant saying you need this, I feel like people wouldn't take the handbooks more like as serious.
Yeah.
Is that a real thing? Because
Absolutely.
we make sure they have a handbook before they open. So how important is it? And do you agree? I'm sure you do, but let's get into it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So it's absolutely essential. It's an absolute essential part of the onboarding process for these new hires. And that's just a part of it, right? The handbook is important for a couple of reasons. One, you got to have a handbook that's an acknowledgement of both state and federal, in some states, county and city. So you got to have a handbook that's an acknowledgement of those labor compliance laws.
Wait.
Yes.
Just right there. Okay.
Right.
Hold on.
Uh-huh.
You're trying to tell me that the handbook needs to incorporate federal, state, city, and sometimes local laws within the handbook?
It just depends on the state.
Dude,
some states
it's a lot of business in your business.
It is, and we simplify all of that for our clients, and it's all very state, local, specific. It needs to be. California is the best example, right? Things are different.
You mean the worst? You mean the worst example?
The worst, I guess it is the worst example. But the best example of how we're able to automate change for clients and simplify, so these doctors aren't caught off guard or have an employee that comes up to them and says, "Hey, did you know the PTO policy has changed, or the PTO laws?" But that's just part of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Acknowledgements of labor compliance laws are very important because, some states, for example, are default states when it comes to unused PTO. If you don't have it clearly identified in a handbook as to what goes on with unused PTO, some states, it's an automatic payout at the time of separation. So that's just a small example. But then the handbook also, by design, is supposed to take the guesswork out of for each new hire, right? What's the tardy policy? What is vacation policy? What's the threshold before one starts accumulating things like that? You don't want to. The policies aren't secrets, right?
Yeah,
you gotta have them. You gotta have them detailed. That's the handbook. Then you've got job descriptions that go right along with that, and then of course all the mandatory new hire documents. So it's all very essential.
Well, you're kind of like leading me to my next question, and that is best practices for onboarding an employee. And I knew, I'm not dumb, Scott. I knew that was going to tee us up right into this conversation. So handbook in itself is like, if I'm just going to like bring this down to my level, it's really just setting a tone with your team so that they know what the rules are of your practice. And what the rules are of the state, but it's also holding the employer accountable as well.
Absolutely,
because there's a two-way street there, right? So if we do an HR manual handbook, and we're putting all of these roles in it, that's a role for you as well. So it's like setting an agreement up. I think that's an important piece because here's my little take on handbook. Actually, I'm going to take that back up. How important is handbook? We're not moving forward until we talk about this because this is something for me. I would strongly suggest folks not be too heavy-handed with their handbook. No pun intended. Heavy-handed with their handbook because that's a contract with you and the employee as well. So if you break your own rules, now you're in trouble.
Right.
So my question to you is how do you simplify a handbook so that it favors the employee and or employer, it favors the employer. Yeah. But like the minute you document this contract, now you got to hold yourself to your own handbook with the employee. True statement?
It absolutely. It keeps everybody in line. It keeps everybody straight, which is important. And a lot of times, I mean, and I think the best way to answer that question or address what you just said would be that's why you have a professional in the dental industry put together a handbook so that you can have the proper advice. Having a general attorney prepare or borrowing one from your friend who started a practice in 1993. I mean, these aren't things that are ever a good idea. But
Yeah.
a lot of time, I mean, I get calls all the time from clients. Hey, Scott, I need to know what to do about this particular situation. And my first question is, well, what's it say in your handbook that we have customized for you? And so sometimes, to your point a few moments ago, it's a guide, right? What do I do in this particular instance? So
Yeah. Okay, cool. I had to say that one because there's been times where we have helped our clients let somebody go or
yeah,
where we're having an issue, and then they came back to us and said, well, you're not living up to your end of the bargain. And so I do feel like handbooks can be a two-way street where you can get into some trouble there too.
yeah. If you're not, handbook policies and acknowledgments of labor compliance laws, you're only really going to get yourself into trouble if you're not following what's in that employee handbook or minding a particular timekeeping related requirement like paid sick leave and the calculation that goes with that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, okay, cool. Well, again, good question. I put you on the hot seat a little bit there, but I liked it, Scott. I liked it. So just in general though, with handbook kind of aside, let's go back to the next question. And that's just like best practices for onboarding a new employee. And I will share a story about HR for Health and Ralph, who runs your company. Ralph told me at the CDA a few years ago, onboarding an employee can have such an impact to that employee's successful journey in your business.
Absolutely.
And it was something that stuck with me. It's like having the business cards ready, having the shirt printed in their size ready. It was just like this onboarding kind of process that was like best practices. So I think about that kind of stuff when I ask questions like this. So there's kind of like this culture feel side of it, but then there's also like this legal part of it as well. Scott, anywhere you want to take this question, buddy?
Yeah. Well, I think a good place to start my thoughts on all of this is to start with what we see all the time with established clients, established practice owners that we work with. 9 out of 10 times, an issue that they're having with a particular employee, whether it's a tardy or an attendance issue or performance or whatever it might be, typically when there's an established prospect that I'm talking to and they're having employee issues, those issues are directly related to how that employee was onboarded. And generally speaking, as you know, most established practice owners, unless they're an HR for Health client, quite frankly, don't have a robust onboarding process. And so an employee that is not performing up to par, maybe didn't sign a job description. Job descriptions are right along with all of the new hire process, right? The job description's purposeful for many reasons. One, it's typically what our clients use to post into their Indeed postings.
Yeah.
It's important for understanding who it is that's sitting across the table from the doctor. Who are they interviewing? Is this individual going to be able to fulfill that role in the practice, right?
Yeah.
Can you handle these duties? But it's also very effective long term. It's a great tool for objectively evaluating performance. It's a great tool for managing through milestones. So it's a good career pathing tool. We can talk a lot about the importance of, but it's super important to set the right tone. If you're onboarding your employees, your new hires into your sexy new practice that looks fantastic, why would you half butt this part, right?
Yeah.
You want to bring your employees in, include them into that culture, and that's the other part, right?
Well said. Yeah. Well,
have everything ready to go for them. Have everything
dialed.
formalized. Have an offer letter. That's these are all they all work hand in hand together, but having a way to maintain all of this is also important as well.
Yeah. Well said, buddy. I think about two things with this kind of conversation, and that is, I think about like a presentation I do. We call it Next Level Ownership, and I've delivered it a few times. And the first slide, the first part of the presentation is all about leadership and setting accountability and follow or roles, agreements, setting the tone for what this person's going to do for you. Just being totally dialed on expectations and agreements and all the things that I expect from you.
Right.
And then it's the accountability part of it afterwards, right? So that the accountability part, I don't think HR for Health can really help someone. Maybe you guys can, but like the doctors have to do that accountability piece. But if you don't set the expectations and create a job description and create agreements, then there's nothing to hold someone accountable to something.
100%.
There's nothing to, right? So
100%.
So I think that's I love that's what you said is best practices for onboarding, because too often, we just do a dental assistant ad and they should kind of know what the job is. And so, okay, this is what we do. And they just half-ass it.
Right.
Well, that sets you up for failure in the future. And so actually that's actually my next question. Failure, and that is how to fire someone.
Yeah.
And look, like I'm gonna shoot all of you guys straight. This is the real deal right here, and that is, you will probably let someone go within 90 to 6 months of a startup, just like acquisition. Quite frankly, if you jumped over to the other program, because someone didn't do something right, or they're just not cutting it, or they said they could, they said that they could bill, and it turns out they can't. And you're going to have to let someone go based on performance. So since we just talked about setting the tone and the agreements and the job descriptions and then holding someone accountable, now we're trying to hold them accountable. How do we fire them because they're not living up to their to their fullest potential or what we expect? So if you do everything right, HR manual, onboard, set expectations, hold them accountable, document. Well, you're probably going to get to the documentation, but how do we now let this person go and rehire someone else?
Yes. And again, this part of this part of unfortunate experience of being a practice owner is inevitable, right? Unfortunately, it's inevitable for every practice owner. And again, it always comes to the onboarding process. You and I always call myself a recovering banker, but for good reason.
I say the same thing. We are recovering bankers, no doubt.
We are recovering bankers, but part of what we learned over many years in practice finance was you got to look at the unwind of something, right? You got to figure out how to unwind. And the best way to deal with the inevitable is to put everything in writing in the very beginning, to have the job description so that you can objectively hold people accountable to the things they said they could do or have signed off on. Because if you are going to terminate somebody, that's the first part of it, right? You got to have signed handbooks, job descriptions, all the documentation. So that's first and foremost. Have that set up for you. Onboard every new hire exactly the same way. Don't ever skip a step. And then if it comes to that and you have to terminate an employee, the whole right to work state, the whole right to work, it's a myth. I mean, there's technically every single state is right to work except for Montana. But
What's that mean? What's that mean, right to work? What do you mean?
Well, right to work allows, the assumption is it allows doctors, practice owners to just terminate without any just cause. They can just terminate. Not true. Not
other than Montana.
Right.
I have a startup in Montana. That's great to know. So peace out. No reason. Bye. See you later.
Absolutely not the case anymore. You know as well as I do, these doctors aren't, if they're not documenting, if they're not stepping out the process to manage somebody out of the practice without proper documentation.
Yeah.
And Is the reason they were terminated, is that a policy in the handbook? Again, it always goes back to to the employee handbook, but document, whether it's an informal documentation, a conversation, just a note to put in the employee profile.
So
Mhm.
to the employee,
Mhm.
or just yourself writing yourself notes. And it's an attorney once called this, we got to paper the file,
Yeah,
right?
right,
There's soon to be no more paper.
right.
But what you're saying, it paper the file means we got to paper the file in case this person decides to like go after us. And hey, look, here's
Mhm.
all the crap that I've been dealing with, right?
And paper the file, so to speak, right? I mean, that's one of the beauties of being a client of HR for Health is there is no paper. They've got an HR platform that they can easily go and document things. Or if they got to send somebody a write up, they're written up because they were tardy for the fourth time or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
Having simple and easy ways to track
Yeah.
those types of issues, violations is what we call them. Then you're going to have a much easier way to terminate that employee, not have the recourse come back out on you. And a lot of states, if somebody files for unemployment, some doctors really don't want to pay that unemployment. You got to have documentation provided to the state, the policy, write-ups.
All the stuff.
Otherwise, they're going to get that ex-employee is going to get the unemployment.
All right. So here's a question.
Yeah.
Is there a way, back to the best practices for onboarding, is there a way to onboard someone
Mhm.
for a quote unquote temporary period
Mhm.
to see if their performance or their ability is on point,
Mhm.
and a way to make it easier for us as the employer to let them go
Yeah.
without having to paper the file? Is that a thing? Is there like a 90-day trial period deal?
I mean, technically, you can have a 90-day probationary period where that is detailed in an offer letter and it's detailed in the job description. So that is a way that is a way to kind of framework the unwind of a relationship. That's part of it, right? Um, but you also want to make sure that I mean, the documentation, buddy, is the key. Documentation is the key.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it's so hard probably for you to be on a podcast with a national audience, and I'm peppering you with questions, and it's different in Montana versus California versus Ohio, where we were
Right.
born and raised.
Yep.
So I totally get that. I
Mhm.
guess that's kind of the value that HR, that's one of the many values that HR for Health has, is that
Right.
you've got specific people that understand federal, and we talked about this already, all the way down to
Mhm.
the local. And so there's probably not one answer that matches all here. So, and I always say, folks, disclaimer, guys, disclaimer. What
Mhm.
you hear on this podcast may not be for you. It
Right.
may not make sense for you. I always get clients that call me and they're like, well, you said, I'm like, dude, you're in New York City. Of course, I don't think you can build out a 6-op practice. You can't. We like, that's not even a possibility in New York. Just like, the HR laws in California aren't going to be the same for Ohioans, right? And so
Right.
you have to understand where you get your content from, folks, because even my program, I have to understand you. Scotty has to understand you
Yep.
before we can give you advice in your practice with your
Yep.
vision, with your business plan.
Yep.
So enough with the books and the podcast quoting. And I talked to my friends on Dental Town, and we were on some blog, and this is what we were talking about, folks. Like, in order to get the right information for you, you actually have to probably hire some folks to listen to your story
Yep.
and to deliver good content. But I think this is great. The podcast thing, it gets information out there just in general. Hey, go ahead.
It does. I was going to say, we're talking about the onboarding, and we're talking about, the unfortunate having to terminate an employee, but long term, obviously we're talking about startup doctors. These doctors are spending a lot of money these days to start up practice. But as time goes on, the most valuable asset of any dental practice is always going to be the team. It's always going to be the employees. And
100%. Yeah.
And it all always, I sound like a broken record, but it all goes back to how employees are onboarded and setting the right expectations, and then having a plan to career path with these employees.
Love it. Love it.
These are all part of the things that we're able to simplify for practice owners, because it's a wonderful thing when we talk to an established doctor that's just looking to increase efficiencies in their busy practice, and they have 10 employees and 8 of them have been there for 15 years. That's a beautiful thing.
That's a beautiful thing.
It is a beautiful thing, man.
I love it. Yeah.
So
no, I look, I'm not afraid of talking about firing people, because we're in the world where you have to get really good at firing people if you want a great company. That's the truth. Okay.
100%. Yeah.
And so I love talking about the squishy fun. Let's get them a jersey and a name tag and business cards, and let's just make this super fun. 1000%. You want a culture that everybody loves and thrives in. That's the kind of stuff you need to do.
Yes.
But don't make a mistake of it. You have to get good at firing people, because if you want your practice to exceed all your expectations, excel, I'm sorry, the labor force is just not what it used to be. And that's a fact. No. That's a fact.
Not at all. There is something else that I wanted to mention. I didn't completely answer your question from a moment ago, but the time frame thing that you'd asked, a look-see period, if you will, on
the probation stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the probationary period is part of it, but one thing that a doctor can always do legally is they can always have a working interview. A working interview isn't, a lot of doctors are scared of it because some doctors have gotten themselves into trouble, but generally speaking, the reason that that's an issue is because they're not putting things in writing. And so having a working interview template that details time frame. So sometimes working interviews can be just a day, or it could be an entire week. But you got to detail time frame, a beginning and an end, how they're paid, all that stuff.
Love it.
That's a really great way to see if somebody's going to fit in the practice. And we recommend, if you're going to do that, a day's probably not going to cut it, because maybe not all of the employees are there on that particular Tuesday. So let's have some exposure to this possible new individual with everybody.
Love that. Yeah, it's perfect. All right. This is the moment where I let the comments come in with questions. It's kind of a free form, next level, kind of ask Scott or HR for Health some questions.
Cool.
Stefani piped in today, one of our senior front office coaches. She leads a lot of efforts on our side when it comes to the front office. Stefani asked, back to the HR manual, what's the ideal process for amending or making changes to a manual? And I know this is really great value for HR for Health,
right?
But please answer this as if you have HR for Health or you don't. Just keep it broad. But what's the answer here for Stefani?
Yeah. Hi, Stefani. Yeah, that's a great question. If a client's not an HR for Health, if a doctor is not an HR for Health client and they have a handbook and they want to make changes to it, having guidance to make sure that if they're updating a handbook or they're adding a policy, you got to find out, especially if it's kind of a complex or a policy that puts the practice owner in more favor than the actual employee, right? That's where doctors sometimes get in trouble, is they're making up their own policies and they don't have the right advice to make sure that they're safe.
Yeah.
These are safe policies. And that can get really expensive, as you know. Updating a handbook with attorneys, that can cost a lot of money.
Yep.
So that's kind of more the DIY route, which we certainly don't recommend with a handbook. But an HR for Health experience simply means, one, we automate change. We update handbooks as laws change. Some states, like California, we're updating twice or 3 times a year. But if a policy, if a practice owner wants to make a policy change, picking up the phone and calling one of our HR specialists and saying, hey, I want to make a change to my PTO policy, or I want to have this threshold before this can happen as a benefit for the team. Is this going to be, is this worded correctly? And 2, is this compliant?
Yeah. All right. So let's say we've gotten past that though, Scott.
Okay.
So we've decided what we're going to do. We've consulted with you. You guys bless the change, and the change is going to happen.
Yeah.
So now we have a new handbook, technically. Does that get redistributed? Like, what's the process there?
Absolutely. And so if we have an update with significant policy changes, or just a policy change, that does trigger a new it either triggers an amendment to the employee handbook, or it's a whole new sign if it's a number of different policies. These are all things that are made very easy to our clients because it's all handled digitally.
So essentially, Scott, you could do an amendment where it's just one page, this was amended, sign,
Correct.
and then paper the file. Or you could send the whole thing and say, okay, re-sign the whole thing, and
Right.
friendly reminder to read everything also. But this is really the only thing that changed.
Right. Exactly.
Either way, you're good.
Either way, you're good. And I'll
it.
use myself as an example. As an employee of HR for Health, I'm sure you can imagine we use all of these solutions internally. and when changes are made to a handbook, for me as an employee or my colleagues here, it's handled one of those ways, either an amendment or a new handbook update.
Next Level probably needs a handbook, Scott. Now that Stefani's asking these questions, she's gonna hold me accountable to this. But yeah, we're probably at a place where we need a handbook.
We can help you with that, Mike.
Could you really? All right, perfect. Well, Scott, today was super fun. I feel like we covered a lot of great things.
Yes.
Biggest HR issues people overlook. We handled how important a handbook is, best practices for onboarding new employees, which is super huge for startups. Yes. And then my favorite, how to fire somebody. It's not my favorite. I'm sounding like a cold-hearted son of a bitch right now, but it's so true, guys. It's so true that you have to actually get good at that.
Right.
It's in fact, when my startups have to fire someone inside 2 months, it makes me actually happy for one reason, is because so early on they have to do it, and they're going to have to do it 50 more times maybe in their whole career. So it's a great lesson to learn inside the first 3 months that Next Level is still involved, because now I get to coach them through that person. That's like such a great life lesson, business lesson. Are you with me there?
I am. And I'll tell you something else to share with you is that, a practice owner being held hostage by a crappy employee is the worst place to be. And every single time, 100% of the time, we're talking to a potential new client where that's going on with one, God forbid, 2 or 3 employees.
Yes.
It absolutely every single time, the reason they are put themselves in that position is because they have no policies. They don't know how to terminate this employee. And as you know as well as I do, because you've seen it happen many times, it really messes up the practice culture.
Oh my God. Like I don't care if you have a rock star in your organization, you get rid of them facts. It's a really hard thing to do.
It is.
But not having policies, handbooks, structure around that hurts you to let someone like that go. So that we've come full circle, right? Like onboarding, handbooking, or how to fire, like that's full circle. Guys, this is the hardest part about business ownership. So one of my favorite episodes, but something that really gets overlooked. Final comments, my friend Scott from HR for Health. Anything that you want to give, we're going to put a promotion if you have something, or your contact below in the description. For folks that are on Facebook YouTube, you can watch us live with all the Mike Dinsio hand gesturing and drinking coffee, and you can check us out on YouTube. But Scotty, any last things that you want to add to the episode before we shut this bad boy down?
So there are 2 QR codes at some point during the show here. One is to download an employee hiring toolkit. Nice. And then there's also another one if you want to schedule a call with me to learn a little bit more about HR for Health, or you just simply have a question. I'm here to help. But I think in closing, doctors, let's not DIY HR. Set the right foundation, set the right expectations, so that if you do get in the ugly part of practice ownership and you're having to terminate, you've got the right tools to do it. But it's also more about making sure you're efficient and and safe with your employees.
Safe and efficient. I love that. Just really setting the employee up for the best chance that they have. That isn't that the truth? Unfortunately, I've made this episode more about firing and letting go of people's problems. It's more about setting people up for success.
Yes.
Now you have a safeguard to let them go, but if you haven't done your job in training and setting expectations and job descriptions and agreements on the front end, you haven't done your job for their success. Facts.
Well said. Well said. And that's the thing, right? No employer ever hires a new hire with the intention that, well, I hope they only last for a short period of time. The intention is that employee is there to stay and grow with that startup doctor.
That's right.
Sharing their vision.
That's right. 100%. Well, without further ado, my friend Scott, it's always a pleasure. Folks, please, please, please follow us. Rate this one, Google review it. I don't care. All the things. Please do that. It matters to me. And another friendly reminder that we are switching both programs, Startup Unscripted and Dental Unscripted, Dental Acquisition Unscripted, to one house, one brand called Dental Unscripted. It'll be one program, and it'll have all the startup, acquisition, and practice management stuff. We're going to start bringing Paula into most of these conversations on a practice management, because I know that a lot of you listen to this program, you end up getting into ownership, and then you're done with me. The truth is we have a whole team that helps post-close and running your business, and you guys need great content too. So we're going to bring the whole house into one called Dental Unscripted. You can check us out on dentalunscripted.com. Nice. But again, everybody, thanks so much for participating, being part of the program. And without further ado, let's shut this bad boy down. See you later, Scott.
Take care, guys.